It's another Football Friday here on News OK Live. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, all by my lonesome here in Oklahoma City as our coverage teams are dispersed elsewhere, somewhere on the road to Dallas, Texas. Along with his beat partner Ryan Aber is our OU beat writer Jason Kersey. And then somewhere from Morgantown, West Virginia, take me home, country roads, Jenny Carlson, columnist, and OSU beat writer Kyle Fredrickson.
We're actually giving it up to Pittsburgh. That's where we are right now. Staying in Pittsburgh, driving to West Virginia tomorrow.
Gotcha. Hey, let's start with the Sooners, Jason. Jenny, you'll jump in on this one. Been a lot of debate in Oklahoma, started by ours truly, Barry Trammell, about who the Sooners' biggest rival is indeed. Of course, what Barry wrote, that it's not Texas anymore, it's Oklahoma State, and he judged it by the response he gets from OSU readers and a lot of other things. So, Jason, let me ask you, who's the Sooners' biggest rival? How about it, Jenny? You take that question, and we'll find Jason.
I think it's definitely something that's more debatable now than it has been in a long time. I still think there's probably more glee amongst OU fans for beating Texas, but obviously the importance of beating Texas, the grandeur of that game, the rivalry itself, it has been diminished. There's just no other way around it. It wasn't too long ago whenever these two teams got together, they were playing for Big 12 championships. They were playing for national championships. Now, if you've got one playing for, a conference title, it feels like a big year. So clearly it's not what it once was, and OSU's much more in the conversation for conference championships than ever before. So I think that has changed the balance somewhat. But, until OU people start turning up, Pistol Pete, stickers upside down on their cars and stuff like that. That's, to me, that shows that the OU Texas rivalry, it's something different, and it probably always will be something different because of how interconnected those two are, and even more so since Texas lost Texas A&M to the SEC.
Is it just a matter of the hoopla? I'm bringing Kyle Fredericks on this one until we can get Jason back. Is it a matter of the hoopla that puts Texas and OU over the top? There is, like Jenny said, there's no upside-down Pistol Pete's. There's no neutral site game. Kyle, what's your observations about OU Texas as a little bit of an outsider, having come from Colorado?
Yeah, well, it's interesting from my perspective. I've been in Oklahoma since 2010, and if you take that sample size of this rivalry, it's not even close. Bedlam has been way more entertaining. The games have meant a lot more. So putting it in a vacuum, for me, it's pretty interesting. But at the same time, they just don't have that tradition in terms of being competitive year after year. But I thought it was interesting just reading Barry's reader response blog that he put out. Going back and forth with some of these OU fans who were very upset that he would even mention OSU, as the Sooners' bitter rival. It kind of goes back to their idea that, OSU is going to be a little there. It doesn't matter if games, just that mentality that had come with this rivalry. The fact that OSU was one for the last years. It's really interesting. I think, and it just kind of fluctuates year to year. If Texas resumes to prominence and they become a powerhouse like they once were, I think that we're not having this conversation. I think the Red River rivalry really is supreme. But until that happens, Bedlam undoubtedly has been more exciting.
Jason, we'll bring you in on this. And the question is, who really indeed is OU's biggest rival? Let me phrase it to you this way. Who's OU's biggest football rival? Because culturally, it seems to be people want to make the Texas argument. How about just biggest football rival?
Well, I think what Kyle said is right. Right now, it seems pretty obvious that Bedlam has been a bigger deal. It's meant more in both the Big 12 and even the national conversations the last 5 years or so. But overall, throughout history, I still think Texas is the bigger rival, and I think that's the reason why fans reacted the way they did to Barry's column. coming to going to the game in Dallas. The state fair, the pageantry, the like I think somebody said, the down horn sign. I mean, all of those things. People put upside down Longhorn stickers on their cars. I mean, I just think that overall people still maybe view Texas as the bigger rival, even if they're not right now.
Okay, Jason, staying with you. Again, Texas, a decided underdog going into the game on Saturday. That's the reason why Barry and others think that the Cowboys have become the biggest rival. Can you conjure up a scenario in which Texas pulls off the upset Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's really unlikely. But I mean, if Baker Mayfield comes out and throws 2 interceptions in the first quarter and gives Texas an early lead, they get the momentum on their side. I would say the crowd on their side, but I don't think there's going to be much of a Texas crowd. But if they get the momentum on their side and get that going, then sure, I think it could happen. I mean, these guys, it's obviously not a great team right now, but they're still really talented players at the University of Texas, and it would make their whole season to beat OU. It would make Jay Norvell's whole season to beat OU. So, and he's the one calling the plays. So, yeah, I mean, it could happen. Will it? No, I don't think so, but it could.
Jenny, for all the years that we would look at Texas dysfunction, for when Mac would say things like, after beating Baylor, which was in those days Baylor with a lowercase b, he would say things like, we just want to celebrate this great win over Baylor before we start talking about Oklahoma. There were things that, Cedric Benson would say Mac was psychologically disadvantaged. I think actually they coined that phrase before David Bourne. Now it seems like we know what real dysfunction is. The tweeting from the locker room, the firing of the athletic director, one of these 3 people was the offensive coordinator and somebody else is the play caller. Have we reached the height of Texas dysfunction?
Well, there's got to be people in Austin that sure hope that's the case. I mean, if it gets much worse than this, I'm not sure, what you would be looking at. Maybe players walking out, refusing to practice. I mean, to me, that might be worse, but that's about it. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just crazy. I mean, you've got guys sniping at each other. Chris Boyd retweeting at halftime of a game last week. And to my knowledge, he's not been suspended for any part of this game on Saturday, which Charlie Strong has always preached this really tough, my rules, my way or the highway. I mean, a guy tweets at halftime and you don't suspend him for even a quarter or a half of this game. If that's changed, that's news to me. But to me, it just sort of, I don't know, it really makes me wonder what is really going on. Charlie Strong, has had this seemingly high bar for expectations and behavior and that sort of thing. And something that would indicate that there's, dissension and rifts and problems, he doesn't put the squash on at all. So it's just a little bit peculiar to me that you see what's going on. I mean, the Twitter war thing, the upperclassmen versus lowerclassmen, a freshman class especially. I mean, I can't remember anything like it, and it's playing out so publicly. It just, it almost seems, I mean, you don't want to say too good to be true because that's not what it is, but it seems like a movie script that you wouldn't believe because why in the world would it happen that way? I mean, that's impossible. Of course it wouldn't be happening that way. So to me, it really has spiraled down in a way that I really wasn't expecting it to go.
Jason, I listened to your Nonfiction Writers podcast with Brian Davis of the Austin American-Statesman. Something that really jumped out at me, though, is the continual blaming of Mack Brown. Are we reaching the end of the time where anybody from Texas can reasonably blame Mack Brown for this mess, or do they still have a couple more months of it and maybe another season?
Well, I mean, I do think that the program wasn't in great shape when Charlie Strong took it over, and this is only his second year. I'm not sure it's entirely fair to blame it all on Mack, but I also don't think it's entirely fair to say that this is all Charlie Strong's fault. I don't think he inherited a great situation. However, with just how bad things have gotten so fast, I mean, Mack Brown's last year, Texas was one game from winning the Big 12 championship. and now they're in complete disarray. And so yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough, I think, to say for sure, but Mac shoulder's a heavy part of this play.
And Jenny, Mac Brown's last year at Texas. Who won the OU Texas game?
I believe Texas did.
I believe that is what happened. Let's stay on OU Texas one more minute. Jason, the OU running game. A lot of questions about that. It seems like people always want that which they do not have. Last year, the running game was historic. Samaje Perine was setting NCAA records, and everybody was saying, whatever happened to our passing game? Now the opposite is true. Does OU unpack its running game Saturday at the Cotton Bowl?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems for the OU running game has been the offensive line. They haven't played it very well. They've moved guys around. They put Derek Farniok now as the starting left guard, doing a lot of different things, trying to piece together an offensive line that can be effective. And I think until they do that, it's going to be hard for the run game to be extremely successful. And Texas, for all their problems, they have a pretty good defense. So I don't know how successful they'll be running the ball, but they're going to need to get that element of their game going, because if they don't, I don't see any way that they could compete with teams like Baylor and TCU and their defenses if they're a very one-dimensional offense. And then on top of that, you have Baker Mayfield running for his life back there still a lot, getting sacked way more than he should. So that offensive line really, I think, is a critical thing for any goals that OU may have moving forward this season.
The longer you talked about that, Jason, the more I thought that answer might fit under the topic of conjure up a situation where there could be an upset. That offensive line, you're right, and it seems like it's more of a culprit on the running game than maybe Baker Mayfield's success or Lincoln Riley's scheme so far. Hey, Jenny, sort of the crossover here to OSU, West Virginia. Which of the former Bedlam coordinators should OU most be concerned about tomorrow? Joe Wickline or Jay Norvell?
Oh, I would probably go with Jay Norvell. I mean, the truth is that Gerard Hurd is still a pretty dangerous weapon, and he's a guy that looks like he's got some passability to go with that obvious talent that he has running. So, I mean, as Jason mentioned, there's not a whole ton of scenarios that you could look at that you would expect Texas to be able to pull the upset. But if OU makes mistakes and Hurd can capitalize on them, and Norvell seems to have some, I mean, obviously last week maybe notwithstanding, they seem to lay down against TCU. So I don't know, that may be the outlier. Maybe they come out more fired up on Saturday. But, they do seem to have some things that they can do that get success for Hurd. And I think if he can, do some things, make some electric plays, which clearly he's capable, seems like to me that is a reason that Jay Norvell might be the one to fear more than Joe Wickline on Saturday.
Sit tight, Jason. We're going to switch over to OSU West Virginia now. We'll come back to you at the end. Kyle, Mason Rudolph has been a guy we've studied, thought about. We had high expectations. There was a thought that maybe he wasn't meeting them a couple weeks ago, especially with the second half performance against Texas, and yet against Kansas State, he looked like the guy maybe we thought we'd see. So which Mason Rudolph shows up in Morgantown tomorrow?
Oh, my guess is one that's maybe a little bit in between the Texas Mason Rudolph and the Kansas State Mason Rudolph. Obviously it seems like the hand numbness that we talked about after that Texas close victory, I almost said loss, because it sure felt like it in a lot of ways. But, that doesn't seem to be a problem. He seems to be healthy. He's got his running backs back, his top two backs, and despite the fact that he didn't need them to get a victory against Kansas State, anytime that you have your top two rushers back, it's going to help you as a passer, take a little bit of pressure off, the need for him to be so efficient in the pass game. But he's going on the road in a raucous environment, and one that's going to be a whole lot more raucous than what he faced in Austin. This is homecoming for West Virginia. They're doing a stripe out the stadium game. It's a night kickoff, so all those West Virginia fans are going to be full of moonshine by the time that this thing starts.
Hey now.
So It's going to be
moonshine.
It's going to be unlike anything Rudolph's ever played in before. And considering how this OSU team is, the factors that needed to come into play for OSU to win these past two games, close victories. They needed some calls from the officials, it seemed like, some fluky things to happen. I see Rudolph struggling a little bit. I see that this is another game where we're going to see some growing pains. Now, that being said, without Carl Joseph in the defensive backfield for West Virginia, Rudolph's job got a whole lot easier, considering Joseph was, the Mountaineers' very best player. And I really don't think you can make an argument against that. So a lot of things come into play, but being that it's on the road, being that, it's against a West Virginia team that I still think is pretty solid after that OU loss. It could be another tough one for Rudolph.
Jenny, I gave this question to Kyle. I'm switching it up a little bit. They got two big losses in this game on defensive side. Ryan Simmons for OSU, Carl Joseph for West Virginia. Which of those two absences have a bigger impact Saturday?
I think it's Carl Joseph. OSU has played with Ryan Simmons pretty sparingly over the last couple games. He went out early in that game last week. He had, I believe, an ankle tweak a couple of weeks ago in one of those non-conference games. So they've had guys that have stepped in and played when he's been hurt. And obviously Chad Whitener came in last week, and he's the guy that's going to start on Saturday. He played fantastically, and I think he makes a lot of people think that while it's not going to be seamless, you don't lose the guy that is your leading tackler, a 30-something start guy. You don't lose that and automatically pick right back up and play, better, or somebody would have been playing instead of him. I get that, but I think that they have to feel a lot better about where they are, because those defensive backs from West Virginia, and Jason saw this up close and personal last week, they really leave those guys out on an island. They've got 2 and maybe even 3 guys when Joseph was still healthy that they were willing to just say, you go man to man and, beat your guy. You make the play. And so now they lose one of those for sure guys in that secondary against a team that has a wide receiver group that I would say is at least a couple notches better than OU's wide receiver group. I think that that's going to be a really big test for West Virginia's defense, and how are they going to handle that when OSU goes 4 and 5 wide and throws a bunch of guys out into pass patterns. I think that could be a real struggle for them.
And yet, Kyle and Jenny, the Cowboys have not, the West Virginia Mountaineers are the one team in the Big 12 the Cowboys have not beaten since 2013.
Yep.
How do you explain that, Kyle?
Well, I mean, you got to look back at the couple times that they played. You go back to that 2013 game. It's J.W. Walsh, young quarterback. It's Mike Yurcich's only his 4th game as offensive coordinator. Things start to snowball. Like I mentioned, that's a tough environment. And then we saw what happened last year. OSU was in no position to beat any kind of Big 12 contender in that 5 game. But it seems like the pieces are in place where this should be a close game. I think you had mentioned this, OSU is a 6-point dog. I think that should be about what they're at. But just looking at skill position players on paper, it seems like a game that OSU should win. But being on the road, I'm not so sure that they're able to break that streak that you mentioned going back to 2013.
Okay, so let's segue to our picks. Based on that, Jenny, what's your pick for the OSU game? Let's go do OSU first. Excuse me, and then we'll do the Sooners Longhorns. Jenny, pick.
Yeah, I'm going OSU. I can't remember what my score was. We had them in the paper yesterday, but I got OSU in a close one. I think I was sort of leaning OSU early in the week, but then the news of Carl Joseph's injury came out, and it sort of solidified my lean. So I went OSU, I think by maybe 3 points, 27-24, 28-24, something like that. I think it's going to be close, but I do think OSU defensively, I think that they'll be able to be okay with what West Virginia throws at their offensively. Yes, it's Dana Holgerson, but this is not, the Mike Leach air raid, throw it every time. They've got a more balanced run-pass attack. So I like OSU's defense. And, I think Kyle's right. It's going to be interesting to see how Rudolph fares in a hostile situation where, they have high expectations. He's been in hostile environments before, but those were largely, whatever happens games. Whatever happened at Baylor, it was going to be okay. Whatever happened at OU, they happened to win that day. But, he's played well, but not with the level of expectations that continue to build this season. So how he plays is going to be key. But when he doesn't have a numb hand, he doesn't seem to throw it to the other team. So I like their chances because of that.
Jason, quicker. Who do you pick in OSU, West Virginia?
I picked the Mountaineers 35-31. I picked that before the Carl Joseph injury. I'm going to stick with it, even with the injury. I think that West Virginia is a better team than what they showed in Norman, and I think the fact they're getting the Cowboys at home will help. So I'm going Mountaineers.
That'll help. I don't know if it'll help a lot. West Virginia didn't show me a lot of offense, at least as much as I thought. Kyle, who you got in this game?
I'm with Jason on this one. I picked before the Carl Joseph news, 30-26 West Virginia victory. I'll stick with that. I mean, it could be maybe a little bit closer than that. But for me, it just comes back to this is an OSU team that's 5-0, but neither of its Big 12 wins really impressed me all that much. Whether it's what needed to happen in Austin for them to get the victory, how a fifth-string quarterback was able to run all over the Cowboys in the first half, albeit they made adjustments and really, held things down in the second. It just it hasn't really been impressive enough for me to think that they can go out on the road in this environment and do it. Now, like I mentioned before, I think that OSU has the better talent at skill positions. I think that Mason Rudolph is a much better quarterback than Skylar Howard, but putting those pieces together, it's going to be cold outside in that environment. This just seems like this is a game where a young OSU team slips.
Okay, we'll make it easy on OU Texas. Any of you three got Texas keeping it close? Jenny?
Nope.
Jason?
I said 38-14 with the game staying fairly close for the first half, and then OU pulling away in the second.
Kyle, your pick.
I don't remember my score, but I think that OU scores at least 50 points, and I think that Texas will be lucky to get to 20.
Okay, our final question. Guys, who is your rival? We've been talking about the Cowboys, the Sooners' rival, whether it's the Cowboys, whether it's the Longhorns. Jenny, who's your rival?
I know who some people would probably say is a rival of mine, or several rivals, but you know what? It has to be two ways, doesn't it? I mean, I don't really buy into that, so I'm not against anybody. I'm a lover, not a fighter, so I don't know. I don't have a good answer. Who's my rival?
Who was Clay Center's big rival? Come on.
Oh, well, now that's okay.
Pick one.
It's Abilene. Those guys were hard to stomach, that's for sure.
There you go. Everybody's got a rival. Abilene, yeah. Clay Center. When's the big game this year? Has it already been played?
I think it has, and I think Clay Center beat them to a pulp. I think they did what they were supposed to do.
You might need a new rival if it's not competitive enough. Kyle, who's your rival?
Oh, geez. I'm tempted to say Anthony Slater because he is my friend, but when it comes to competitive things, we tend to get after it a will bit. But I will
fighting over the podcast studio.
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
that was serious. There was going to be some fisticuffs there had we not stepped in, Jason.
I was uncomfortable. I really was. That's a good one. Thunder beat writer versus OSU beat writer remake of The Odd Couple. Jason, you're last. Who's your rival?
Well, today,
Jason, you're frozen. Come on.
My rival. I am frozen. Am I still frozen?
We can see the shirt.
Go ahead. Now we got you.
Okay. Did you see the shirt? Go Bears, Noble. Tonight, my rival is Tulsa Memorial, but also I consider anyone who doesn't like Pomeranians a rival. So.
You took it there. Let's stay there. I'm signed up for it. It's familial. Okay, that's all for this edition of Football Friday, but you can stay with the best coverage team anywhere, every day at News OK, and every morning in the Oklahoman. Enjoy the games.